Okay, the other mime is too long. Let's do this one on Miketz. Torah on Miketz, Lamed Bey, second column. Okay, the Alter Rebbe says, Inyan Chanukah, to understand the Inyan of Chanukah. I can see something here.
Give us, Rabbi, a little synopsis.
One second. Let me see something here. Okay, let's do this one anyway. Okay. In Chanukah, to explain the in Chanukah in Ekova and Espenedis, they established the miracle of Chanukah by lighting candles. Masha'en came b'shar nisim b'pesach b'yitzis mitzrayim teichlu matzahs heat matzah. B'purim imei mishte v'simcha keneged agolus, corresponding with the golus which shows gam king gufni b'mitzrayim b'chemel veinim u'b'mei haman b'ikesh lashmid u'l'shlolim lovis. So he says like this: Purim and Pesach, they wanted to kill out the Jews. Pari wanted to kill all the Jews. Haman wanted to kill all the Jews. But Mashenk in Chanukah, Shal Yisrael Shrim Alad Masam, they were not physically in Golus. In other words, by Mitzrayim, the Jews were physically in Golus. By Purim, the Jews were physically not in the Eretz Yisrael. They were in Golus. But Chanukah Shal Yisrael Shrim Alad Masam. They were living in Eretz Yisrael. They weren't driven out of their land. So physically, the Jews were not in Golus in the time of Chanukah. The Golus HaTorah was only the exile of Yiddishkeit. Therefore, Kavu Benedus, therefore, they established it with miracle, with candles. In other words, the Alter Rebbe is saying that Purim and Mitzrayim were physical Golusin. Therefore, they had physical mitzvahs. You have to eat matzah, you have to do physical things. Purim, you have to drink and whatever, and eat. There's a mitzvah to eat. Chanukah, on the other hand, there's no mitzvah to eat. There's no Shuddus mitzvah on Chanukah. If you have a Su'udah and you say a Dvar Torah, so then it's what? That's not a meal. We're talking about a meal of... and that's biblical. We're talking about the rabbinic. So he says, therefore, what did they do at Chanukah? How do they celebrate the miracle? With candles. Candles are spiritual, the spiritual goals. Fake al kavod b'neiros to shema pasik. Ki ner mitzvah v'teira od. A ner is a mitzvah, Torah's light. V'derech ha'chayim tichachas musar. And it's the way of life with admonishment. Lahaving in pasuk zem, and to understand what this pasuk means. V'gam sefer the krava derech chayim terchachas musar. What does it mean? The way of life is admonishment of musar. He said, "Tzarich bi et eze derech chayim hulevana teira mitzvah samur lam ma'ile b'pasuk." The Alter Rebbe is asking like this. The pasuk says ner mitzvah v'teira od. Okay, that encompasses all of Yiddishkeit. Then the Torah says, "V'divrei chayim tichachas musar." That means there's a third level. There's Torah mitzvahs, and there's the way of life. So the Alter Rebbe is asking, what way of life is there besides Torah mitzvahs? Torah mitzvahs came chayenu, that is our life. He says like this, Ki ma shehem shalam mitzvah l'ner v'Torah la'od. Why is mitzvah likened to a candle, and Torah is likened to light? Why is a ner called a ner? Because you have oil. You have, fuel. A wick of oil, a wick of wax. Even though oil itself doesn't have any light to it. Just have oil, there's no light. Yet it's called ner shemen. A candle of oil. But oil itself is not light. Not only that, not only is oil not light, if, as you know by Chanukah, if the wick falls into the oil, it's going to extinguish it. So oil itself is no concept of light. Nevertheless, through the oil and only through the oil do you have a flame. Shall have it when you have the wick and the wick draws a little bit of oil, right? That's how it lights. It draws a little bit of oil. Because when the oil is done, the light becomes extinguished. So he's saying, what's the inyan of a ner? Oil itself is not a fire. But when you put a wick into the oil and you light it, so then the whole shemen becomes the flame. It draws in through the wick into the flame, because then as soon as the oil is done, there's no more flame. So the flame really is through the oil. The oil is not a flame, but the flame is through the oil. So it is also by a mitzvah, Hagam Shurotz in HaMelech, even though it's the will of the king. Bali Shum Tam V'das. There's no understanding, there's no nothing in the mitzvah, it's just what Hashem wants. In other words, why is a ner a mitzvah likened to a candle? So the Rabbi explains, what's the candle? The candle is the fuel, the shemen or the wax or whatever. Now, the oil itself has no flame to it. Okay? It's only through the oil, though, which is drawn into the wick, they have the flame. In other words, the oil itself is no flame, but only through it do you have a flame. He said the same thing is with a mitzvah. A mitzvah is the will of Hashem. There's no understanding, there's no nothing to it. It's what Hashem wants. Nevertheless, through the mitzvah, do you bring down the chokhmah of Hashem, the kedusha of Hashem, into the world. So it's exactly like a fire. The shemen has no fire itself, but through the shemen you have a fire. The mitzvah itself is nothing to it, just will Hashem, no chokhmah, no understanding, but through it do you have that level. והחוכמה והעוונה שבתורה שבעל פה, וזרק לאהוב ולהשיג פירוש וטעם המצווה, כל מסכתא לפי עניון. So therefore, again, what is Torah Sheba'al Peh? Torah Sheba'al Peh explains the reason for the mitzvah, but it is not the mitzvah. The Torah, which is Hashem's Chokhmah, becomes revealed through the ner. So he says, now what does this mean in Avodas Hashem? Okay? So in other words, a mitzvah is a candle, which means the wick itself, the oil itself is not the fire, but it creates the fire. So what does that mean in Avodas Hashem? How does it work? You see in the Ksiv, it says, when in the morning, every morning, when he prepares the candles, you should do the ketores. And there's been when he lights the candles in the afternoon. Why in the morning does the Torah use the word behitive when he prepares it and lights the two candles? And by night it says bahales. When you elevate, one place it says behitive, which is also actually preparing the candles and lighting, one of them, or two of them. And the evening it uses a different word. So he says like this: in a Knesset Yisrael, the Yidden Malka Neshamas Yisrael, which is the source of all Neshamas Yisrael, is B'nikra B'Shem Menorah. Okay, like this. You have a menorah. Let me say this outside first. You have a menorah, right? That refers to the Jewish people. Then in this menorah, you have, let's say, 7 branches, or 8 branches, whatever. Those 7 branches represent individual Jews. There's Jews that serve Hashem with Chesed and Gvura. So if you're a Chesed Jew, you're not a Gvura Jew. You're a Gvura Jew, you're not a Chesed Jew. But the whole menorah itself, the Jewish people, is called the menorah. Now, that Rebbe is going to explain how is this menorah carved out in the Beis HaMikdash? How is it made? It was one block of gold. There's no piecework, right? It was a block of gold the size of a kikar. they hammered it out to form all the decorations of the menorah, which is unbelievable if you think about it. No piecework, no soldering, no sticking things together. They had one block of gold, and they banged it out until they had all those intricate designs on the menorah. So he says, why did it have to be like that? Hashem goes in, make a menorah and piecework, who cares? I mean, today's menorahs are beautiful, they're piecework, who cares? You couldn't even tell the difference. So the Alter Rebbe is explaining why. Because he mixes shekol yisoim ba'achtus, because the source of every single Jew is one, the same one thing, but mischalekas l'shivanedis, it spreads itself out to seven candles, or like he says, there's shishim ribuy. From 7 becomes 70, and then generally in the neshamis you have shishim ribuy in the neshamis. These are all part of the 7 branches of the neshama, of the menorah. So you have a lot of Jews in this part of the menorah, this part of the menorah. But what the Alter Rebbe is explaining, what's the origin of all the Jews, is the same thing. All the same origin. We all come from the same place. And he says, Shekol nitzis mischalek l'shishim ribi nitzis prazi k'mevur b'tanya. In Tanya, Perek Lamed Vav, I believe, the Alter Rebbe says that there's 600,000 general neshamas, and each one of those neshamas branch out to 600,000 neshamas. So if you want to know how many neshamas there are, it's 600,000 times 600,000. That's how many individual neshamas there are in existence. V'derech klal nichlo b'shivin nefesh yodav v'sein b'mitzrayim. V'klal min ha'klal nikra b'shem shivanetes. So he says like this. Really, it's 600,000. If you want to more general, 70. You want to make it more general, 7. Din Aaron shushvina d'matrinusa, which is Aaron kohen lekel el yemishiva re'im ha'mefarnesin u'mashpiyim alukusi yizbarach b'knesses Yisrael. What was the role of Aaron? He was the accompaniment of Malchus. That his role was to kindle. He was one of the 7 shepherds, meaning he fed the Jewish people. Like Moshe Rabbeinu fed Emunah. Aaron HaKohen fed the Jewish people of illuminating their neshama. That's why he kindled the menorah, the 7 branches. He kindled the flame, the neshama of every single Jew. Sheye'iru be'er ha'ava, that should be illuminated with the light of love. L'slait eila b'kleisa nefesh, to be burning to Hashem, be inflamed in Hashem, going up to be the longing of the soul. Shall have a like the flame that goes up by itself. Ulakayim mitzvahs v'yahavta. Then to fulfill the mitzvah of loving Hashem, shemekabem aleim b'krishma, that they accept upon themselves when they do Shema, she'ekach be'em eslamite, that it should be real love, not fake love, but really that every neshama should love Hashem in its entirety. That the whole neshama is only loving Hashem. There should be a person himself doesn't have this ava. Instinctively, yeah. But a person in Neshama, like he says, a person mitzad atzmei, who megushim is very grub, coarse, physical, mundane, u'malubish binyanim gashmi, and he is very heavily involved in physical things. Lahoya yachol luli HaKadosh Baruch Hu ezri. The Gemara says, it's a pasuk in Tehillim, but the Gemara explains it. Tzeifer Rasha l'tzadik ha'mevakish l'misei. Says the Rasha looks out to the tzaddik, wants to kill him, which means simply nefesh habamis wants to spiritually kill the nefesh shulakis. And then the Gemara says, "V'almali HaKadosh Baruch Hu ezrei." If Hashem wouldn't help the nefesh shulakis, lo yuchalei, because it says Elokim yazvenu b'yadei. Hashem helps him. Which means like this: a person mitzad atzmei is very coarse, low life, coarse, mundane, everything. So, without the help from above, the neshama, the power, the koyach of above, the ava coming down from above, it would be almost impossible for us to do it on our own. That was the level of Aaron HaKohen. Aaron HaKohen kindled the menorah, meaning Aaron HaKohen revealed the level of Elokus from above, of the menorah, that would help the Jew kindle his neshama that he should love Hashem only and nothing else. And that was the Avodah of Aaron HaKohen. V'zel b'chinas b'hales and b'hitivei. Okay, what meaning? Hine Omer Razal Chazal tell us, Afal pi she'esh yored min hashemayim, even though the Gemara says in Yuma that in the days of Shlomo Melech, a hot coal, came down from heaven. Well, the first base of Mikdash. A fiery coal came down from heaven. Revutzakari, it was crouched like a lion, and it was on the Mizbeach. So they had this heavenly fire that came on the Mizbeach. Nevertheless, the Gemara says, Mitzvah lahavim min hahedyet. The people themselves have to bring the, like it says in the pasuk, Eish tamid tukad ala Mizbeach leisichba. You have to bring your own, the Jews had, or the Kohanim also had to bring a fire. So it was a mixture. There was a fire that came from Hashem, and there was the fire of the Jew. And both had to be. It wasn't enough just to have the fire from Hashem. You have to do it yourself. But doing it yourself would be impossible without the fire that comes from Hashem. So he says, what does it mean, Hedyet? Sha'ava sha'adam lekeach, machmes ha'elemis. That this is the ava of the person means the love that the person gets from meditating into the greatness of Hashem. There's a fire that comes from above. That's a different story. But here we're talking the Hedyet, the person himself has to bring an ava of his own to Hashem. Now how does a person get to love Hashem? He meditates into the greatness of Hashem. The intellect stimulates the love to Hashem.
So Rabbi, the oil is the Hashem that through the mitzvah you are able to bring it out.
Correct.
This fire of the Hashem is what?
The fire of Hashem or our fire?
No, the fire of Hashem.
The power from above that Hashem gives every single neshama to be able to become illuminated, enlightened, engulfed with Hashem.
I understand. In this scenario of the oil and filter that comes out, what part of this is the fire of Hashem coming down to start the whole thing?
He didn't get to there yet. But there is the by every mitzvah it says command the Jews to do it. Hashem is telling the Jews, command Moshe to command the Jews to do it. That is the koach that comes from above. When Hashem tells a Jew to do something, He's not going to tell us to do something we cannot do. When Hashem tells us to do something, He gives us simultaneously the ability to do it. Now in Chumash you have the concept Vayikra Moshe, Hashem calling to Moshe, and then it says Adam ki yakriv, if a person will become closer to Hashem. You have a concept of every mitzvah begins with Vayidaber Hashem o Moshe Lemer Tzavis b'nei Yisrael, meaning bind the Jewish people. So that means Hashem is giving the koach to the Jew to do it. Even a rabbinic mitzvah is Hashem is giving the koach through the chachamim to be able to do it. It's all coming from Hashem.
So every time that they bring the korbanos, the fire was coming from.
There was a fire constantly on the Mizbeach from Hashem, but at the same time the Jews had to bring their own physical fire.
Every time it was coming down.
Yeah. No, it came one time, but it was always there. It never extinguished.
It looked like a lion.
Crouched like a lion. The Gemara says in Yuma, Revutzakari, crouched like a lion. What does that mean? I don't know.
So what was the actual fire that consumed the carbon?
Both.
But I heard the lion would consume the carbon at once.
No, it had to be the fire that the Jews brought also consumed the carbon.
Have this lion coming down and it just quickly.
I don't know. Seemingly, they're both fires together did it. Because that's the whole Aved of a korban. You have the revelation from above, then you got to bring your own fire.
The lion came once a day or twice a day for each?
No, it was constant. It came down once and it was always there forever. It didn't keep coming down.
It was always a lion, cow, crouched.
The fire was crouched like a lion. It didn't look like a lion. It says crouched like a lion, whatever that means.
The whole of basic initiation.
And Shani.
And Shady?
Seemingly. I don't know. What?
What you said, the lion?
It was crouched, bent down like a lion. That doesn't mean it looked like a lion. It's crouched like a lion crouches.
You realize the second big dimension, it looked like a dog?
I don't know.
Somewhere I heard something about the dog.
Second.
I hear a lot about dogs, but
No, that's when they desecrated the temple, no? That was a dog.
That was a wolf.
the wolf, okay. Pirosh, Agit, the Sha'ava, Sha'adam Lekech Me'elim Esayanim. What he gets from meditating into the world of Malchus. Shemelech God of Anera Kol Ha'olam Ezri Hashem created, with one word, created all the universes and all that. Be'elef alaf meriva kadmoi. K'mavoer be'gemaro b'zeir. Bir in yuri b'ya'elim gadlusei. When you meditate into the greatness of Hashem, how He created infinite worlds, infinite malachim, infinite everything. So when you meditate deeply and you internalize it, it actually creates a love for Hashem. And therefore Chazal said to say Baruch Shem Kved Malchus Leilam V'Od Lefnei V'Yohavta. In the first base of Mikdash they didn't say Baruch Shem. The Chacham in the second base of Mikdash they instituted to say Baruch Shem. In Chumash that doesn't say Baruch Shem, it says Shema V'Yohavta. Right? Why do we say Baruch Shem? So it says because when Yaakov, two things. Moshe Rabbeinu was on Har Sinai, he stole he heard the Malachim saying Baruch Shem, so he stole it. Or when Yaakov Avinu, he wanted to bless the children, the Shekhinah left him, and Yaakov said maybe there's something. So they said Shema Yisrael Shem Yisrael means Yaakov. Shema Yisrael Shem Hashem Echad. So Yaakov Avinu said Baruch Shem Kved Malchus Leilam. Okay, so therefore the Gemara says we say it. Yaakov Avinu. When the Shekhinah left him and he thought something's wrong with the kids, so they said Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Listen, your God is our God. So he said Baruch Shem Kved Malchus Leilam. So one opinion is Moshe Rabbeinu took it from the Malachim, but both are true. He took it from the Malachim and Yaakov Avinu said it. But in Torah it doesn't say Baruch Shem. And if you think about it, if the reason we do it is because Moshe Rabbeinu stole it from the Malachim, so why do we have to say it then? How does Shema Yisrael get between Baruch Shem get between Shema and Yohavta? Okay, the reason Yaakov Avinu said, I understand. He said Shema, they said Baruch Shem, but in Chumash it's not there. Why do we need to say Baruch Shem between Shema and Yohavta? Want to say Moshe Rabbeinu stole it? So say it before Shema, during whatever. So Al Rebbe is explaining because to come from Yechudi law, the higher level of Yichud, the world doesn't exist, only Einaid Mulvade, to V'Yohavta, in the time of the first base of Mikdash, they were able to go direct, they were greater than the Neshamas. But afterwards, they had to get this intermediary of Baruch Shem, which speaks about Yichud Tatah, that there is a world, but the world is bottled, that happened in the second base of Mikdash. Okay.